All right, so you know how everyone's always been kind of fascinated by those 2012 prophecies?
Yeah.
Like, what did it all really mean? Well, we were too. And
Yeah.
we did a deep dive into this guy, Jon Rasmussen's work. Yeah.
Interesting guy,
Yeah.
shaman, energy healer, been exploring these predictions for like over 20 years.
Yeah, over 20 years. And he's got this really interesting perspective. He's weaving together prophecies and scientific data and his own personal insights.
What's really cool is he doesn't just focus on the Mayan calendar, right? Like a lot of people do.
Right.
He connects it to all these other traditions, biblical prophecies, the Hopi Fifth World, the Q'ero Pachacudi.
Wow.
It's almost like he's seeing this convergence of ancient wisdom traditions, right? And they're all pointing toward this kind of similar shift.
Yeah, and it's not just these ancient traditions, right? He brings in real hard science, too.
Oh, absolutely.
Talking about climate change, the shift in the magnetic poles, depletion of resources,
Yeah.
real-world trends that a lot of us are concerned about anyway.
And one connection that really blew my mind was how he linked the Mayan concept of Hunab Ku to the Hopi idea of Tokpela. Have you heard of those before?
I've heard of them, but I don't know much about them.
So they both refer to this like central creative force, right? That's driving all these shifts, this intelligence behind like everything. It's like he's saying that these different cultures, totally separated by time and geography, we're all tapping into this similar understanding of how the universe works.
Yeah, it's wild how these ancient cultures all seem to be onto something.
Yeah.
And then there's that date, right, that we all remember, December 21st, 2012, the end of the Mayan calendar.
Right.
It kind of adds to this whole feeling of urgency, doesn't it? Even though it's in the past now.
It does, even though it's in the past now. It's like that date serves as a marker, like a turning point. But what Rasmussen emphasizes is that regardless of what actually happened or what may still be unfolding, the real focus should be on how we experience this transition, how we choose to move through it.
Okay, I like that.
He says it all comes down to, our mindset, our internal world.
That really resonates with me. I've definitely noticed how, like, just my own perspective can shape how I experience things, even when things are kind of tough.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
So is he saying it's all about positive thinking? Like, just put on a happy face and everything will be fine?
No, not exactly. He acknowledges there are, difficult paths and there are easier paths.
Okay.
And he lays out this idea of the hard way and the easy way forward.
Okay, I like that. So tell me about the hard way. What does that look like?
Well, he connects it to what he calls the warrior masculine archetype.
Okay.
And it's this kind of energy that's focused on, dominance, control, self-preservation at all costs.
Gotcha.
And he doesn't mean this in like a gender-specific way. It's more about a way of being.
Yeah.
That's rooted in fear and separation.
So how does that play out, like, in the real world?
Well, think about things like how we constantly see competition in society. Right.
The way violence is almost, glorified in the media. How we just exploit natural resources without really even thinking about the long-term consequences.
Yeah, that's true.
It's all about, taking, dominating, protecting what we have.
Right.
Even if it means harming others or the planet in the process.
Yeah, that's a pretty grim picture, honestly.
It is.
And he's saying this is the direction we're headed if we keep going down this hard way.
Well, he presents it as a potential outcome, right? Like a warning about what can happen if we let fear kind of dictate our actions.
Gotcha.
He even connects it to things like nuclear war, pandemics.
Oh, wow.
Collective inability to adapt to change.
Yeah.
Those are some pretty serious implications.
Okay, so then what's the alternative? What's this easy way talking about?
Well, it's all about shifting our perspective.
Okay.
Moving away from that fear and embracing a more collaborative, compassionate way of being.
I like it. He talks about this global healing wave, almost like humanity's kind of waking up from this long sleep and realizing we're all interconnected,
I like the sound of that. So it's kind of like we have a choice individually and collectively between these two paths.
Exactly. And even though he calls one easy and the other one hard, he doesn't present it as like a simplistic choice.
Gotcha.
He acknowledges that even the easy path will have challenges, right?
Of course.
But the difference is in how we approach them,
Right.
Do we approach them from a place of fear and scarcity, or do we approach them from a place of love and cooperation and a willingness to adapt?
Yeah, that's the real question.
That's the real question.
So it's not just about what happens to us, but how we choose to respond to what happens.
Exactly.
I like that. That's powerful.
It is.
Yeah.
It is.
Okay, so then he gets into this idea of the loving masculine, right?
He does.
I'm intrigued. Tell me more. I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
Yeah, so it's not about denying the masculine energy, right? It's about balancing it with the feminine.
Gotcha.
It's about strength, courage, but also compassion and a deep respect for life.
Okay, so what would that shift look like in our society? I mean, it's hard to even imagine what that would even be like after living in a world that's so focused on this warrior masculine for so long.
Yeah. Well, Rasmussen believes that shift, right, would be reflected in everything.
Yeah.
From how we structure our societies to how we just interact with each other on a daily basis.
Okay.
Imagine, a world where our leaders are chosen for their ability to inspire and unite people.
Yeah, and not just their power and authority.
Exactly. Yeah.
He seems to have a clear preference for leaders who can cultivate hope,
Yeah.
He even argues that hope itself can be a catalyst for change.
Absolutely.
Like a real force in the world.
It is.
It's not just some, pie-in-the-sky sentiment.
Right, because he talks about how fear, tends to lead to more fear, more division, more conflict, but hope. Hope has this ripple effect.
Yeah, that's interesting. I've never really thought about it that way. I've always thought of hope as this, kind of nice sentiment.
Right.
But I never really considered it as this, actual force for change.
Yeah, it makes you think, right?
It does.
How you respond to those challenging situations in your own life. You lean into fear.
Yeah.
Or do you try to find that, that spark of hope to guide you?
Yeah, it's a good question.
It is. It is.
Because it's really about recognizing that we have a choice in how we respond to any situation.
We do.
We can choose to be, reactive, driven by fear and self-preservation, or we can choose to be more, proactive,
right?
Guided by that hope and a vision for something better.
Exactly.
And speaking of taking action, Rasmussen offers some pretty specific guidance on how we can navigate these potential shifts on a personal level.
He does.
No.
He talks about things like simplifying our lives, getting rid of all that excess stuff, the commitments that just weigh us down.
Yeah, it's a good point.
He also emphasizes the importance of nurturing our relationships.
Yeah.
Like really connecting with those people that we care about.
Yeah.
Building those strong communities.
He also talks about spending time in nature, right?
Oh, yeah.
Even preparing for these shifts to preparing for a big storm.
Right.
Making sure your house is in order, stocking up on supplies,
yes,
checking in on your neighbors.
I love that analogy.
Oh, it's a good one.
It really highlights how important it is to be prepared, right?
Yes.
Not just physically, but also mentally, emotionally, spiritually.
Have all your bases covered.
Yeah, it's about cultivating that sense of resilience and inner strength that can help us weather any storm.
Yeah. And he doesn't shy away from some of the potentially tougher aspects of these transitions either.
No, he doesn't.
He even brings up the possibility of a natural population reduction.
He does.
As part of this rebalancing process.
Oh. Yes, and it's really important, to approach this topic with sensitivity.
Of course.
He doesn't present it as a prediction or a certainty. It's
right.
more like an observation based on, the cycles we see in nature.
Okay.
Think about how forests go through periods of growth and then forest fires that clear out the old to make way for the new.
So he's suggesting that a similar cycle could happen within humanity as a way of restoring balance.
He's raising the question.
Oh, well.
And it's certainly something to, ponder, especially when we look at things like, declining birth rates in many parts of the world.
Right.
The challenges of sustaining our current population level,
Right.
He's not saying it's good or bad, just that it's a possibility we need to be aware of as we navigate these times of change.
Yeah, it definitely challenges that assumption that bigger is always better.
It does.
Endless growth is the only path.
Right. It brings us back to that adaptability, right? Being able to adjust to changing circumstances is crucial for any species to survive and thrive.
Right.
And humans are no exception.
So even with all this talk of potential upheaval and global shifts, he's not advocating for just giving up on things like sustainability and environmentalism, right?
Absolutely not.
Okay, good.
He's very clear that our actions still matter,
Yeah.
We have a responsibility to care for the planet and each other, regardless of what the future holds.
Yeah, I like that.
And he emphasizes that even if some of these, large-scale changes are inevitable,
right,
we still have a choice in how we respond to them and how we shape the future.
Yeah. It's not a helpless situation.
No.
We still have some agency here.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And he reminds us that even if, the world doesn't end in some dramatic way, the work we do to live more consciously, more sustainably, more compassionately will still have a positive impact.
It's like he's saying, hey, even if the 2012 prophecies were off by a few years, or even if they're not going to play out the way some people predicted, wouldn't it be amazing to create a world where we live in harmony with nature and each other anyway?
Exactly. It takes the pressure off of needing, a specific outcome to justify all our efforts.
Right. It's about the journey.
It makes the journey itself worthwhile.
I think that's a really beautiful way to frame it.
Yeah, it is.
As we kind of wrap up this deep dive into Rasmussen's work,
Yeah.
I'd encourage you to think about what resonated with you.
Yeah.
What questions came up, insights.
Yeah, for sure.
Maybe even consider some of those practical recommendations.
Absolutely.
What would it look like for you to simplify your life?
Yeah.
Nurture those relationships. Spend more time in nature.
It's all about taking those insights and making them your own, finding the practices, those ways of being that feel authentic for you and support you in creating a life,
Right.
a world that's aligned with your values, and a world that's aligned with your values.
Right. It feels like he's encouraging us to take the long view.
Yeah.
Think about the kind of legacy we want to leave behind for future generations.
Yeah, it's about shifting our focus from what's in it for me to what kind of world do I want to be a part of creating?
Exactly. And he's not saying it has to be this massive, overwhelming thing either.
Right.
He talks about how even small changes in our own lives, like the way we treat each other, the choices we make each day, can have this ripple effect.
He uses this beautiful metaphor of a stone being dropped in a pond.
Oh, I like that.
And the ripples spread out, right, touching everything in their path.
Yeah.
So even our seemingly small actions can have a much wider impact than we realize.
I love that. So to bring it back to where we started, with all those 2012 prophecies and all this talk about big shifts and potential upheaval, it sounds like Rasmussen is ultimately offering a message of hope, not doom and gloom.
He is.
Not just like, oh, the sky is falling.
Right.
Right.
Yes, and he leaves us with this really thought-provoking question. If nothing extraordinary happens, wouldn't the work we've done to live more consciously and compassionately still enrich our lives?
It's like he's saying, hey, even if the world doesn't end, wouldn't it be great to live from a place of love and awareness anyway?
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah, that's a great point.
It takes the pressure off, right?
It does.
Of needing that specific outcome
to
justify our efforts.
It's about the journey.
It makes the journey itself worthwhile.
Beautifully said. Well, I think this has been a really fascinating exploration, and I hope it's, sparked some curiosity for our listeners, maybe even inspired you to take some action in your own life.
Yeah, me too.
So thanks for joining us for this deep dive. Until next time, keep exploring.